I don't know if this will sound strange or just like another bizarre internet story, but whenever I think about that night, I feel that same chill in my spine that I felt when I was 11 years old. My parents had already gone to sleep, and I was awake watching TV in the living room, curling up to take the trash out. It was one of those nights when everything seems quieter than usual, as if the world was holding its breath. I took the garbage bag, opened the back door, and went to the backyard with our dog, Rex. He was a black Labrador, super obedient, and never let me go alone when I went out in the dark. He always came after, glued to me. That night, he went out with me as usual, or at least I thought I had left. As I walked towards the trash can at the back of the backyard, I remember that the noise of my breathing and my steps on the gravel sounded too loud. I called Rex once, just to confirm if he was still around, and heard a noise on the fence on the opposite side. It wasn't exactly an answer, but it made me think he was out there exploring. I kept walking and called again. "Come, Rex?" This time, I heard a snap, as if someone had stepped on a dry branch, and that's when I realized that I hadn't seen Rex since I left the house. I stood still for a second, looking around, and the backyard seemed wrong. Too silent. That kind of silence that makes the air heavy. I started walking slower, trying to hear anything that indicated where Rex had gone. The cell phone flashlight illuminated only a few meters in front of me, and the rest of the backyard seemed swallowed by darkness. That's when I heard again, steps. But they didn't look like paws. They were heavy, hurried, as if someone, not something, was approaching fast. I turned to look, and I swear by everything I saw something shooting in my direction. It was tall, dark, and the movements didn't seem natural. It was as if she was dragging and running at the same time. I froze for a second. I could only hear my heart beating in my ear, and then I started running as fast as I could into the house. I could barely close the door behind me. I locked everything, touched her with my body shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. That's when I heard a sound behind me, coming from the living room. I jumped, turned, and there was Rex, lying on the couch, looking at me with that usual face, calm, as if nothing had happened. At the time, my stomach sank. He hadn't left home. He was there all the time. What he answered when I called him by his name, it wasn't Rex. It was something else. Something that was in the backyard with me. I went to him slowly, without taking my eyes off him. I touched his head. He licked my hand as he always did. It was Rex. The real one. So, what was that out there? I stood there, trying to clearly remember what I had seen, but my memory seemed a little scrambled. I only remember the feeling. That thing came straight towards me with an absurd speed, and her eyes were not normal eyes. They were very dark, almost without brightness, but you could see that they were fixed on me. I felt that it knew me. He knew who I was. And the strangest thing is that he answered exactly when I called Rex's name. Just like that. At the time, I thought about waking up my parents, but I was embarrassed. How was I going to explain this? It would look like I was making it up, or that I had a nightmare. So I went up to my room with Rex, closed the door, and tried to sleep with him there by my side. But I listened to things all the time. I snaked, creaked, and in a moment, I heard a very low whisper coming from the window. I didn't understand what he said, but it seemed like he was repeating my dog's name, as if you were trying to call him. I didn't open the curtain. I didn't look. I just stood still, with my eyes open in the dark, waiting for the night to pass. The next day, when I told my father that I thought someone had entered the backyard, he checked everything, but there was no sign of burglary or footprints. Everything was dry too, which was strange, because I was sure the floor was still wet from the night before. I went to the part where Rex usually peed, and there was a mark. It looked like a footprint, but not of people or of dogs. It was like a strange mixture, as if it had long and thin fingers, but with a kind of crooked shape. I stood still looking at that with my stomach turning. I didn't show it to my father. I don't know why. I was afraid he wouldn't believe it, or worse, that he would believe it. During the week, I tried to forget, but Rex has changed. He was restless at night, scratched the bedroom door, and howled very quietly when he got close to the window. And always at the same time, around 2 in the morning. I also started having nightmares. I dreamed of that thing running towards me again, only in dreams it could reach me. I always woke up sweaty, with the feeling that there was someone leaning against my back. I even started sleeping with the lamp on. And as bizarre as it seems, one night I heard my name being called outside. But it wasn't an adult voice. It looked like mine, my own voice calling me. At the same time I froze. That calling me by name, with my voice, it was like hearing a distorted echo of myself, but more serious, slower, as if I were testing the words. I stood still in the middle of the room, without the courage to look out the window. And that's when I heard Rex growling softly from the foot of the bed. When I looked at him, the hair on his back was completely bristle. He stared at the door of my room, which was ajar. I didn't hear any noise, but he seemed to see something there. I got up slowly and closed the door with my hand shaking. I locked it. Even so, I stood there sweating cold, listening to the silence, until something lightly scratched the wood of the door outside. I wanted to scream, but my throat got stuck. My parents were sleeping in the next room. How come no one was hearing that? After a time that I couldn't measure, minutes, maybe hours, everything stopped. Rex calmed down, lay down and was quiet. I spent the rest of the night awake, sitting on the bed with my eyes fixed on the door. The next day, I didn't find anything. Not even brands. No signs of burglary. But I knew what I had heard. And I knew that knew my name. I never left home alone at night after that. And to this day, every time I hear some strange noise coming from outside, I don't answer, no matter what it is. Because if that's still out there, I don't want him to know that I still listen. Have you ever been through something that made you doubt your own reality? My uncle died to save our house. I know how that sounds. I would also think it was something in my head, if it weren't for the trunk. My family has this old chest, made of dark wood, full of notches that look like symbols or scars. He was always there, in the warehouse, among old things that no one used. And there was a rule, don't touch the chest. I grew up hearing that I was cursed, but no one was serious. It seemed like just another one of those stories to scare children. But there was a summer, in which everything got out of control. We were going on vacation for a week, and my uncle offered to take care of the house. He was my mother's younger brother. He lived alone, half isolated. It seemed like a good idea at the time. For days later, in the middle of the trip, he called me. It was at dawn. I remember his voice as if it had happened yesterday, shaking, choked, as if I were crying. He just said, "Forgive me. I did something I can't undo. It wasn't supposed to happen to you. It was with me." Before I could answer, he hung up. When we came back, it was as if he had never existed. My mother didn't remember having a brother. Not even my sister. Not even my grandmother. I tried to show photos, messages, anything. They had all disappeared. The albums were intact, but in the photos where he should be, there were only empty spaces or blurred faces. As if time had tried to hide his existence. Only I remembered. And the chest was on the kitchen table. Closed. Intact. But I knew it had been opened. After that, I started to remember things I swore I had never seen. Wishes fulfilled without explanation. Small things at the beginning, money found, lost objects reappearing. But I also remember absences. People who disappeared, and that no one else mentioned. As if they were erased. As if every wish had a price. I didn't tell anyone. It wouldn't make a difference. Who would believe it? But sometimes, I still hear my uncle's voice when I pass by the kitchen at night. As if I were trying to remind myself of something that I too one day can forget. Do you believe that some objects can carry a curse? Or do you think all this can be just the fault of our mind, trying to make sense of the inexplicable? I've never been very attached to technology, but my younger brother keeps buying these different gadgets, so I end up testing one thing or another out of curiosity. It was like that with the virtual reality headset he brought home. He bought it in an impulse after watching some videos on YouTube, and spent the whole day filling the bag for me to test. At first, I resisted, but I ended up agreeing just for him to stop insisting. It was night, we were alone at home, and he had already installed the game and calibrated everything. He just asked me to stay in the middle of the room to avoid bumping into things. I put on the display, took the controls, and started testing the movements. It was a silly training game, kind of to simulate fights. No big deal. Around that time, while I was trying to understand the commands, I heard my brother laughing and saying, "I'm after you," in a joking tone. It was typical of him to make this kind of joke, so without even thinking, I stretched my arm back and gave that light punch in the air, more for the joke than anything else. But when my fist was, I got it right. It wasn't that empty air you feel when you miss a move. I felt like I had hit something real. The resistance, the impact, even that slight cushioning of when you hit someone for real. I took off the display in the same second, with my heart racing. And then came the strangest thing. My brother was on the other side of the room, sitting on the couch, looking at me with the most confused face in the world. At the time, we were just looking at each other. He swore that he hadn't come close to me, and because of the distance he was in, it really couldn't be him. The sofa where he was sitting was leaning against the opposite wall of the living room. He should have crossed everything in silence, touched me, and still returned to the place in less than 2 seconds. Impossible. We laughed nervously, trying to find some explanation. I even raised the idea that maybe I had hit the box of the table or some chair, but there was nothing behind me but free space. The room is small, but it was completely unobstructed. We even turned on the light and turned everything over, just to make sure. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave my head. It was very specific. Anyone who has punched something or someone knows. It's a kind of resistance very different from hitting the air or a cushion. It looked like skin, or muscle. There was even that dry thunk that you feel in the bone, no matter how light the punch is. And the strangest thing, when we passed our hand where I had punched, my brother said it was cold. Like much colder than the rest of the room. I hadn't even noticed, but as soon as he commented, I felt it too. A weird cold, local, as if something had just disappeared from there. We were kind of paralyzed for a few seconds, just absorbing what had happened. After that, we turned everything off and went to the room. None of us wanted to play with the headset that night anymore. But when I went to sleep, I started to get tired. That feeling wasn't just physical. It was as if I had invaded someone's space or something. I kept remembering the touch, the impact, and a kind of chill came along. As if something inside me knew that it wasn't just a coincidence. It was as if, for a second, I had touched something from another plane. I know it sounds like an exaggeration, but I swear that's the feeling. And it wasn't just that day. During the following week, every time I passed near that corner of the room, it gave me a slight dizziness. As if the air there had something different, heavier. On the weekend, with everything apparently normal, my brother wanted to use the headset again. I was just watching, without the courage to put that in my head again. At one point, he turned to me and asked, "Are you hearing this?" I said no. He took off his headset and said that, for a few seconds, he heard someone breathing right behind him, like very close to his ear. We stared at each other in silence for a few seconds before turning it all off again. It wasn't even night yet, but it seemed that the energy of the house had changed. My mother even commented that she felt the room weird lately, and that the cats were avoiding entering it, something they had never done before. The next night, while I was alone at home, I decided to test something. I turned on the headset, but I left it on the couch, just to see if something happened. I stood there, looking at the display, as if it could show me something. About 10 minutes later, I heard a dry noise coming from the living room, as if someone had hit their foot hard on the floor. It wasn't a furniture snat or anything like that. It was like a step. I ran there, and of course, there was no one. But the headset had fallen off the couch. The detail is that he didn't fall straight forward. It looked like it had been thrown to the side hard. I swear I'm not making this up. That's when I decided that I no longer wanted to be alone with that thing connected inside the house. After that, I started to feel a little paranoid. Whenever I passed through the room, it seemed that there was something watching me. I've tried to explain this to myself in every way. Affective fright, imagination, I don't know. But no matter how much I try to rationalize, you can't ignore what I felt at that time. That resistance. That impact. The clear feeling of having touched something that was simply not there. I even considered that it could be a bug in the system, something poorly calibrated. But it doesn't explain what my brother heard. It doesn't explain the fall of the headset. And especially, it doesn't explain why, to this day, I still avoid entering that room in the dark. Things got worse a few weeks later, when my brother decided to sell the headset. He left it stored in a closet in the hallway, in a closed box. No one else messed with that. But a few nights later, I woke up with a noise coming from the corridor. It was a strange mechanical sound, like something turning on and off quickly. When I went to see, the closet was open, and the headset light was flashing, as if it had been activated. We never found out how that happened, because the display was disconnected from the system and without battery. That gave me such a strong chill that I slept in my brother's room that night, and we locked the door. Even after he sold the equipment, there were still times when I passed through that corridor and felt a kind of pressure in the air. A weird feeling, as if there was someone standing there just waiting. The strangest thing is that, every time I looked at the reflection of the mirror near the closet, I seemed to see a shadow in the corner of my field of vision. When I turned my face, I had nothing. It may seem like an exaggeration, but I started to avoid that side of the house. My parents even thought I was having an anxiety crisis or something like that, and maybe they were right. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And if I hadn't taken off that display at the time, I don't know what would have happened. A detail that never left my head was the physical feeling of having hit something. It wasn't like punching in the air, it was like hitting someone's shoulder or chest. A firm thumb with resistance. By instinct, at the time, I thought I had hit my brother, but he was far away. After the adrenaline passed, I kept reliving the scene several times in my head, trying to find a logical explanation. Did I hit the wall and didn't realize it? Did any part of the sofa stay behind me? We checked everything again until the time of the scam, and it just didn't make sense. There was nothing there, only the emptiness. Over time, I tried to forget. Life followed school video game routine. But every time I put on a headset, even if it wasn't virtual reality, I felt that fear coming back. An irrational fear of turning my back and finding something there. And the worst, not to see but to know that it's there. Like a presence. My brother doesn't even like to touch on the subject. He says that it was something in our head, that we were influenced by some video we saw before. But to this day, when the house is silent and I pass through that corridor, I feel as if there is someone invisible looking at me closely, standing right there, exactly where my punch stopped. A few months later, I decided to test the headset again, but this time alone. I wanted to prove to myself that it had been no big deal. I chose a light game, just to explore, without combat or scare. But after about 10 minutes, I started to feel a weird discomfort, as if someone was watching me closely. It was that familiar feeling, but amplified by the isolation of VR. The strangest part was when I felt something lightly brush my left arm, as if someone had passed very close to me. I froze. I took off the headset right away. Once again, there was nothing there. No shadow, no noise, no wind. But my arm was whole goosebumps, and I swear I felt the touch. After that, I could never use virtual reality again. Not even to test it. My brother also dropped the headset, and today it's stored in a box at the bottom of the closet. We never had another strange experience after that day, but the feeling that something invisible was there stayed. Sometimes I find myself remembering the firmness of that impact, as if my memory was absolutely sure that it touched something solid. It's bizarre to remember a touch that, technically, never happened. And it's even worse to think that, maybe whatever it was, he just didn't want to be seen. Have you ever had any bizarre experience with technology, as if something on the other side had answered? I live in a rural area on the outskirts of Tennessee. Everything is very quiet here, no neighbors nearby, only open fields and forests. I have the habit of walking at night, usually after 10 p.m. That's when everything gets quieter and I can organize my head. I've always done this without fear. I take a flashlight and, just in case, my revolver. Nothing had ever happened that made me uncomfortable, until that night. It started normal like any other. The sky was clear, the temperature was pleasant, and I had put on my cap and followed the usual trail, which goes along the dirt road and then skirts the lake. I was already coming back, almost completing the route, when I heard a car coming slowly behind me. It's not common to pass vehicles there at night, but I thought it could be some neighbor going to the city or coming back from work. The car passed slowly, low headlight, and moved on. I thought it was strange, but I kept walking. But about 10 minutes later, I heard the same engine, coming again, this time in the opposite direction. It was the same car, an old dark sedan. It looked like an 80s model. He passed again, without haste, and once again disappeared on the road ahead. At that moment, I've already started to get 1 foot behind. I live in a rural area, on the outskirts of Tennessee. Everything is very quiet here, no neighbors nearby, only open fields and forests. I have the habit of walking at night, usually after 10 p.m. That's when everything gets quieter and I can organize my head. I've always done this without fear. I take a flashlight and, just in case, my revolver. Nothing had ever happened that made me uncomfortable. Until that night. It started normal like any other. The sky was clear, the temperature was pleasant, and I had put on my cap and followed the usual trail, which goes along the dirt road and then skirts the lake. I was already coming back, almost completing the route, when I heard a car coming slowly behind me. It's not common to pass vehicles there at night, but I thought it could be some neighbor going to the city or coming back from work. The car passed slowly, low headlight, and moved on. I thought it was strange, but I kept walking. But about 10 minutes later, I heard the same engine, coming again, this time in the opposite direction. It was the same car, an old dark sedan. It looked like an 80s model. He passed again, without haste, and once again disappeared on the road ahead. At that moment, I've already started to get 1 foot behind. When I finally arrived at the entrance of my property, my relief lasted a few seconds. The car stopped on the other side of the road, as if it was expecting something. I pretended I didn't notice. I went through the gate and entered the backyard, but I didn't go straight home. I hid behind one of the trees and waited. I wanted to see if he was leaving, but it wasn't. The car was left there, stopped, with no light on. A total pitch. Only the sound of the engine on from time to time, then turned off. After almost 10 minutes of tension, I thought maybe he had given up. But when I started walking again, I heard the engine start for good, and the car moving slowly in the direction of my entrance. I didn't think twice. I ran to the shed where I kept some tools and took the shotgun. I was already shaking, but I wasn't going to stay there waiting to find out who it was or what I wanted. I went to the front of the house, near the garage, and I was kind of hidden, waiting for the car to show up. And it showed up. He entered my property calmly, as if he had all the time in the world, and stopped about 20 meters from where I was. The lighthouse was off again. No sound, no door opening. Just that old car parked in the dark, pointed straight at me. When I felt I had no choice, I shot it up. The crash echoed in the night, and that's when the car reversed quickly and disappeared off the road. I stood still for more than half an hour, trying to understand what had just happened. After a while, I entered and locked everything, door, window, even the basement door. Sleep? No way. I spent the night on the couch, with the shotgun on my lap, paying attention to any noise. From time to time, I thought I could hear the noise of tires far away, but it could just be paranoia. When it dawned, I went outside to see if the car had left any marks. I found the tire marks on the dirt entrance of my garage, proving that it had not been a nightmare. What made me more tense was the certainty. That person followed me. I knew where I lived, and I knew I was alone. At the end of the day, I went to the police station in the neighboring city to report what happened. I showed the tire marks and even drew the car model the best I could remember. An old sedan, kind of screwed, looked like someone who didn't want to be noticed. The policeman listened to everything calmly, but gave me that standard answer. No sign, no clear description of the driver, it's hard to do something. I came home even more frustrated. I bought new security cameras, installed motion reflectors, and started walking only during the day. Until today, I've never seen that car again, but every time a lighthouse appears on the road at night, my stomach freezes. The feeling that someone is still around never disappeared. In the following weeks, everything returned to normal, or at least it seemed. No strange car, no suspicious noise, nothing out of place. But the peace I felt on my night walks was simply over. Even under the midday sun, sometimes I turned my head thinking I was being followed. I started to avoid going out alone, something I never imagined doing living in the countryside. The strangest thing is that none of the neighbors saw or heard anything that night. I asked the man who lives 2 kilometers from here. He usually stays on the balcony smoking until late, and he swore he didn't see any car passing by there. One day, I had to review the security camera images because one of the sensors activated itself. It was just a cat, but rummaging the files, I ended up seeing something that had escaped me. 3 nights after the incident, around 3 in the morning, the same car passed slowly in front of my house. He didn't stop. It just passed, as if you were checking if I was still there. That gave me all the goosebumps. And it made me realize that whoever it was, I knew exactly what I was doing. He wasn't just any crazy guy. It was someone with a reason. A plan. I don't like to think about what could have happened if I hadn't armed, or if I had taken another 5 minutes on that walk. Sometimes I wonder if that car had been watching me for days, waiting for the right time. Maybe they already knew my schedules, my routine, even the places I liked to walk. What if the shot to the top hadn't been enough? What if they had insisted? That's the part that leaves me sleepless. The idea that all this may have been just the beginning, and not the end. Nowadays, I still live here, but with a constant fear that I had never felt before. It's as if that night had broken something inside me, a confidence that I didn't even know I had. The sound of tires on the road, the reflection of headlights through the window, even the noise of a distant engine already make me alert. Maybe I'll never find out who he was or what he wanted. But one thing I know, that person was there for me. And that's enough to turn any place, no matter how quiet it may seem, into a nightmare. And you? Have you ever felt that someone was watching you when there shouldn't be anyone around? I work as a night nanny for a family that lives in a gated community. I'm already used to the silence of the big houses and the fact that I'm completely alone downstairs while the child sleeps in the room upstairs. They always give me access to the cameras by cell phone. One is in the girl's room, and the other, facing the living room and the stairs. I usually spend the night watching series at low volume and checking the cameras from time to time, just in case. I've never had any problems. But that night, something was very strange. It was around 1 a.m., and I was watching any episode on my laptop when a notification arrived in the monitoring app, Motion Detection Stairs. I took my phone and opened the video. The clip clearly showed a silhouette slowly going down the stairs, as if trying not to make noise. I was paralyzed for a few seconds. It didn't look like a reflection, or a shadow, or a bug. He looked like someone real. I ran up the stairs, opened the bedroom door carefully, looked at every room. The girls slept peacefully, and the rest of the house was completely empty. I went a little confused, trying to understand what I had seen. I checked the front door and the locks. Everything was intact. I also looked at the windows and even the back of the house, even though it was unlikely that anyone had entered there. Nothing out of place. I went back to the room, feeling a little silly, as if I had freaked out for nothing. But for safety, I left the stairs lights on and kept my cell phone in my hand with the app open. I've been reviewing that video several times. It was clear, a tall, dark figure without a visible face, going down one step at a time, as if he knew exactly where to step. The strange thing is that, in the video, the lights were off. Just the lighting of the night camera, that vision in greenish black and white. This made me even more nervous, because at that time I had just turned on the lights. If it was a live notification, the stairs should be lit. That's when I realized that the time of the video didn't hit. I looked again at the app and saw that the notification had been sent minutes ago, but the video was from the night before. That didn't make any sense. How had I not seen this notification before? And why would the system send an alert so late, with a delay of more than 24 hours? I started to feel a strange chill that made me uncomfortable in a difficult way to explain. It was as if I had been warned on purpose, as if someone or something wanted me to see that video right at that moment of the night. The child was still asleep, and even without hearing any noise coming from above, I went up again to check. I slowly entered the room, only with the corridor light on, and stood there watching. She breathed calmly, facing to the side, clinging to a stuffed animal. Everything was calm, but the whole room seemed to have a heavy energy, as if the air was denser than before. On the way back, I passed the top of the stairs slowly, looking at each step. Something bothered me too much. I took my cell phone and paused the video of the silhouette going down. I froze the image at the exact moment it stood on the third step, and comparing with the stairs in front of me, I realized that it was exactly there that the room camera sensor also began to capture movement. Apparently, after going down, this figure would have passed right in front of me, or at least through the living room. But I never saw anything, nor heard anything. But the discomfort grew more and more, as if the house was keeping something invisible. I went to the living room and spent a while looking at the camera from there too, waiting for some new notification. Nothing happened. I took the control and turned off the TV, trying to stay calm. I sat on the couch and stared at the front door, which was locked with the key exactly where the parents had left it. But the feeling of being observed was constant. I even thought about calling them, but I didn't want to seem irresponsible or cause panic about something that could be a technical mistake. Still, I opened the alert history of the camera application, and then came the real shock. The alert of that night, of the silhouette going down the stairs, had been activated at exactly the same time as the previous day. The strangest thing is that, when reviewing the video carefully, I realized that there was no sound at all. Neither the common noise of the house structure, nor steps, nor hissing. It was an absolute silence, as if the video had been filmed elsewhere or edited. But the latter was exactly the same. The carpet, the handrail, even the frame on the wall. The only difference was the lighting, which seemed slightly darker, as if it had been recorded without any lamps on. That left me with a lump in my stomach. Because at that time, that night before, I was there too, and I didn't receive any notification at that time. As if, for some reason, the camera had only let that video appear now. After that, I just couldn't relax anymore. I started walking around the house, checking the doors and windows again, one by one. Everything was locked. The child slept soundly, without any sign of discomfort. But there was something in that video that bothered me too much. The silhouette looked familiar. You couldn't see her face or clothes clearly, but the way she went down the steps was strange. Mechanic. As if it had no weight. Reviewing the video once again, I realized that it passed directly through the camera, without projecting any shadow, even with the corridor light on. That made me feel a chill in my back. There was something wrong there. I decided to send the video to my boyfriend and asked him to come and keep me company. While he didn't arrive, I kept an eye on the cameras in real time. No movement, no new notifications. When he arrived, it was visible that he thought I was exaggerating, but he agreed to stay there with me until the child's parents returned. We stayed in the living room, talking low, and he tried to distract me. I almost managed to forget about that, until in the morning, while the parents were about to arrive, I received another notification. Motion detection stairs. When I opened the app, the same video, exactly the same, was there, as if it had just happened again. This time I was sure. It was the same video. Same scheduled time, same movements, same image of the silhouette slowly going down the stairs. But the most disturbing is that now the application marked as real time. It wasn't an old recording. It was as if it was happening there, at that moment. But I was in the living room, with my cell phone in my hand, looking at the stairs. And there was no one. Nothing moved. Not a sound. My boyfriend also saw it. We both froze. That's when he suggested that maybe the video was buggy or the camera had some kind of problem. The parents arrived soon after, and I tried to disguise it, but I ended up telling them. The child's father just looked at me strangely and said that some weird things had already happened in the house. I didn't want to go into details. He just thanked me for staying. Since then, I no longer accepted taking care of any children in that house. But what haunts me the most to this day is the fact that that notification, with that video of the silhouette going down the stairs, keeps appearing in my history, as if it had been captured several times. Always with the same schedule. Always the same movement. I just wanted to understand what really happened that night. And you? Have you ever received any strange camera or cell phone notifications that gave you goosebumps? My younger brother has always had a very active imagination. Since we moved to this house, he started talking about the man who lives in the basement. He was about 5 years old at the time, and we always thought it was just one more of his inventions. Child sees something, invents imaginary friend, so no one cared. We even played with it, asking if that man wanted to have dinner with us or if he slept on the couch. My brother always answered seriously, saying that he didn't leave the basement and that he only talked to him when he was alone. Over time, he began to draw this man. At first they were generic scribbles, but then the drawings became more and more specific. He drew the face, the body, the clothes, and a tattoo on his neck. It was like a skull or a strange figure, but you could tell that it was important, because he always made a point of drawing. That's when my mother started to get really worried. She asked where he had seen that man, and he replied. He told me that he lived here before us, and that he was arrested. This frosted me at the time, but we still tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had seen something on TV or heard adult talk, I don't know. The strangest part happened a few weeks later. I was at home with him, just the two of us, and he came to show me another drawing. But this time, he used a large sheet and drew the full-length man, with details that didn't make sense for a child to know. He drew a scar on his arm, a thick cord, torn pants, and such a tattoo on his neck more accurately than before. I kept looking at that and asked how he knew all this. He just replied, "He showed me last night." That was hammering in my head the rest of the day, but again, I tried not to feed too much. But then, a few days later, the police showed up at our door. It was early in the morning. My mother answered and, out of nowhere, the atmosphere of the house became another. I could only understand when I heard one of the policemen saying, "We found a body buried in the basement." They explained that they had received an anonymous complaint and, when investigating, they found the remains of a man who lived there before we moved. It had disappeared a couple of years ago. My brother was on the couch, calm, as if he already knew. The most bizarre? The description they gave of the body hit what he drew, especially the tattoo on the neck. At the time, my mother was shocked. He began to connect the dots, my brother's strange way, the drawings, and now this body that we had no idea was there, right under the house where we slept every night. The policeman even asked if we knew anything, because it really looked like a very specific complaint. My mother shook her head, but I realized she was nervous. After they left, she stared at the basement for a long time, as if trying to understand how this was possible. I went straight to talk to my brother. I asked again about that man, trying not to look scared. He spoke the same way as always, that the man only talked to him when the house was dark, and that he liked to sit on the basement steps. He also said that the man asked for help because he was arrested. That gave me such a strong chill that I couldn't answer anything. He just started playing again as if nothing had happened. But I could never look at that basement the same way again. A few days later, my brother stopped mentioning the man. He simply stopped talking about him, as if he had completely forgotten. I asked if he still saw that man in the basement, and he replied, with the greatest naturalness, that no more he left. It was this answer that made me lose sleep for nights in a row. The way he spoke, without fear, without emotion, it seemed that something had really been resolved, or worse, that it was all real, and he had really helped in some way. The police never came back, and the neighbors began to comment on the discovery of the body, but no one knew many details. My mother made a point of sealing the basement entrance with a padlock, even though no one had used it for years. But even with everything closed, sometimes I still hear some snaps coming from downstairs. I don't know if it's just old wood or if my mind got too marked, but every time that happens, I remember the tattoo in my brother's drawing, and that still leaves me with a cold in my stomach. Nowadays, my brother doesn't remember almost anything. I showed him the drawing a few months ago, and he said he didn't remember doing that. But I remember every detail. I remember the strange smell that came from the basement in the days before the police arrived. I remember how he described the man's voice as funny and thick. I remember how he kept looking at the basement door when no one was paying attention. These memories don't leave my head, no matter how much I try to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. To this day, I don't know how he knew about the tattoo. No one knew that that man lived there before us, and no one ever talked about a disappearance. But my brother drew the exact mark that the man had on his neck, with the same position and the same symbol. Sometimes I think he wasn't just seeing someone, maybe he was really talking to him. And if that's true, I wonder, what else did this man tell my brother while he was there, under our house? And you, have you ever seen a child talking to someone who wasn't there? How far do you think their imagination goes? I've always had a very strong attachment to my grandfather's cabin. It was the kind of place he used to isolate himself from the world and rest, right in the middle of a remote forest, without a cell phone signal and with a silence that was only broken by the sounds of the forest. After he passed away, no one else went there often. My parents even thought about selling, but I offered to take care of the place. Last fall, I decided to spend a weekend alone there. I needed this time away from everything, and I confess that I also wanted to feel some of his presence again. I arrived on a Friday afternoon. Everything seemed normal. The cabin was locked, as always, with that cozy and at the same time lonely feeling she always had. I woke up early on Saturday around 6 in the morning, with that typical cold of the mountains. I opened the door to let the sun in, and noticed the front door open. That bothered me. I clearly remember locking it with the internal latch. It's an old wooden gate, and it only closes properly if we put the lock. On the side of the door, on the balcony table, there was a coffee mug, and the strangest thing, there was still steam coming out of it. Someone had been there a very short time ago. I felt a chill on the back of my neck, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe some neighbor in the neighborhood, someone who knew the place, would have passed by and left it. I took the mug, still hot, and went back inside trying to pretend there was nothing wrong. But I knew I had. I tried to distract myself during the day, giving a general in the cabin, sweeping leaves from the porch, and organizing some old things that my grandfather had left. As the afternoon fell, the discomfort I felt in the morning grew again. The open gate, the hot mug, the more I thought, the stranger it got. I remembered that there were only 2 keys to that cabin. One was with me and the other had been buried with my grandfather. It was his craze. He said that if he left, he wanted to take with him the right to return. The phrase sounded funny to me at the time, but that day, in the middle of that thick silence of the forest, she gave me a lump in my stomach. When it got dark, I locked all the doors and windows, checked the gate once more, and went to the room. I put a chair leaning against the doorknob, more out of nervousness than out of necessity. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I heard claps outside, leaves moving, imaginary steps or not, until around 2 in the morning, I clearly heard the noise of the lock turning at the front door. It wasn't wind, it wasn't imagination. It was the exact sound of a key being turned. I sat on the bed in a jump, completely paralyzed. My heart was beating so loud that it looked like he was going to give me up himself. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to listen again, and then the silence returned, as if nothing had happened. I got up slowly, stepping lightly on the floor so as not to make noise. I went to the bedroom door and touched my ear. I looked through the slit in the hallway window, and everything seemed to be in place, except for the mug, which was now on the balcony floor. I was absolutely sure that she was on the table when it got dark. I went back to the room shaking, with my breath out of step. I locked the door again, pushed the dresser against it, and sat on the bed with my cell phone in my hand, ready to call the police. But do this without any real sign of invasion? They would laugh in my face. But something inside me said that it wasn't normal, that someone or something was there with me in that cabin. I stayed like this for hours, until the sun began to appear through the windows. It was only when the day cleared completely that I took the courage to leave the room. I went straight to the front door, and to my surprise, it was locked, the way I had left it before going to sleep. I went to the balcony to see better, and found the mug still on the floor, with a little coffee inside, still warm. I felt an icy chill run down my spine. I wasn't alone there. I took my things in a hurry, got into the car and left without even looking back. Until today, I never went back to that cabin. And every time I think about it, I can only ask myself, who had the key that night? And you? Would you have the courage to sleep one night alone in an isolated cabin? I work as an attendant at a gas station that works 24 hours, and usually the dawns are kind of monotonous, just me and a few people passing by to buy something fast. That night, everything was normal, until a man came in and stood in front of the drinks refrigerator for about 15 minutes. He didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there staring at the drinks as if he was thinking about something. I thought it was strange, but I tried not to give too much ball because there are people who are really lost, right? After about 15 minutes, I approached and asked if he wanted help choosing something. Then out of nowhere, he just disappeared. He didn't have time for him to go out the door or anything. He just wasn't there anymore. I was stunned, kind of thinking I was too tired or seeing something, but I couldn't understand. When I saw the camera recordings, then I was cold. The images showed that he never entered the door. The refrigerator, however, was open for almost an hour, and no one showed up to close it. To this day, I can't explain how this presence entered or disappeared like that. I was a little nervous, because working alone at night already gives a strange feeling, and this situation only got it worse. I tried to ask my colleagues if anyone had seen something similar there, but no one ever commented anything. I also tried to talk to the management to see if I could turn off the refrigerator for a while, or make some adjustment, but they said it wasn't possible. The refrigerator staying open didn't make sense, because the system should lock the door, even more so at that time of the morning. That same week, other strange things began to happen at the gas station. Devices turning off by themselves, flashing lights, and even low voices that I swore to hear when I was alone. I couldn't tell if it was my head playing tricks, or if there was really something there. The worst thing was looking at the refrigerator, and remembering that man who never entered, but stood in front of it as if he was expecting something. It's a feeling that so far gives me goosebumps when I remember. After that night, I started paying more attention to the refrigerator. Sometimes, even when it seemed that no one was around, it was ajar, as if someone had just opened it and forgot to close it. She tried to close hard, but she always seemed to return to the open door state after a while. I even put some boxes in front, trying to prevent it from being open, but it didn't help much. One night, almost at the end of my shift, when I was organizing some things at the cash register, I felt a strange cold behind me. I turned around quickly and didn't see anything, just the empty corridor and the silent station. I went back to the refrigerator, and to my surprise, the door was wide open. I stared at that for a few minutes, with my heart beating fast, not understanding what was happening there. Then, I closed it slowly, and this time I stayed until the end of the shift looking at her, but nothing else happened. The next morning, I arrived early for my shift, and went straight to review the camera recordings. I wanted to understand if it had been a trick in my head or something I had really seen. I reviewed everything calmly, frame by frame, and I didn't find any strange movement out of the ordinary. That man I saw disappear simply didn't appear anywhere. It was as if he had never stepped inside the post. Since then, I can't get rid of the feeling that something strange happens there during the night. I keep wondering if that open refrigerator would be some kind of sign, or if I would be dealing with something I shouldn't. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't explain it. What would you do in my place if you were alone in such a situation? The following nights, I became more attentive, trying to avoid being alone or near the open refrigerator. Sometimes, when I went to get something, I took a quick look to the side and had that uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching me, even when there was no one. It's hard to work like this, afraid of something you can't understand, and worse, that you don't know if it's real or the result of your tired mind. I told some colleagues about what had happened, but they just laughed and said I was too tired. Maybe I needed to rest more. But I know what I saw. The truth is that, since that day, everything in those night shifts seems to have changed. The refrigerator opens again by itself sometimes, and I don't even try to understand anymore. I just stay on my own, trying to spend the whole shift without more surprises. That next morning, when the gas station was almost empty, I heard the sound of the refrigerator opening by itself once again. I stood still for a few seconds, my heart racing, not knowing whether to look or pretend that nothing was happening. I decided to take my cell phone to record, thinking that if something strange appeared, there would be proof. But when I looked at the screen, I saw nothing but the open, cold, and silent refrigerator, as if nothing had happened. After that, I began to notice that other small objects in the post sometimes changed places without explanation. Nothing very strange, but enough to make me restless. And of course, this presence never appeared on the cameras, even when I saw things I shouldn't. To this day, I don't know what that was. I just know that I don't want to spend another night alone at that station, or open the fridge after midnight. The next morning, the manager called me worried, saying that someone had turned off the refrigerator for several hours during the night, but the cameras showed no one touching the equipment. I was even more disturbed, because I knew it hadn't been me or anyone from the team. I started to wonder if there was something really strange happening there, something that no one could explain, and the feeling of being observed grew inside me. Since then, whenever I'm alone at the gas station at night, I try not to look at the fridge. I know it stays open alone and no one enters, but I can't help fear. The strange thing is that the refrigerator light stays on all the time, and sometimes it seems like she's calling someone to come in, but it's not to get a drink. I just hope I never find out what's behind this, because so far, the only certainty I have is that I'm not really alone in that post.